Welcome to Inspire to Lead. Before we start the episode, we'd like to thank our friends at Roth & Co., innovators in accounting and business advisory, for making this conversation possible. I'm your host, Talia Mashiach. I sat down with Beth Warren, CEO and founder of Nourished by Beth, to discuss getting an internship at American Express is a really big deal. How did you get that?
Networking and connections, articulating things to people, and speaking up for yourself.
Getting those first clients whenever you have any of one of these businesses is the hardest thing to do.
I started in nutrition because I love food. It's always funny when I say that to some people because they think maybe you don't like food because you're in nutrition, you're going to tell me what not to eat. That my background was marketing. You always need a career or a skill set.
What was the biggest mistake that you made along your journey, and what'd you learn from it? Beth, so great to have you today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yes. Okay. Well, let's get started. First of all, just tell us a little bit about you, about your career, your business. Would love to hear a little bit more about that.
Well, I started in nutrition because I love food. And it's always funny when I say that to some people because they think maybe you don't like food because you're in nutrition, you're going to tell me what not to eat. And it's far from the truth. When I started out, I wanted to really help people. And between the two, with helping people, loving of food, I found nutrition. It was actually accidental. It was an elective in my last year of Stern College. They didn't offer it at the time. Thank God now the area is booming in most colleges and so many women and men are coming into the field. But back then it wasn't as popular. And I started having kids and always had this knack for nutrition and food. And I went back to school and always knew I wanted to be in private practice because within private practice, I can develop relationships with people, actually help them. And from there, I automatically started my private practice actually through school while having a baby. And that was my first baby. And by my third, I had my private practice, my RD, registered dietitian certification. I was one of the first businesses to accept insurances and figure out that whole world. And from there, it just grew.
Well, one of the things that was so fascinating to me, and because I think a lot of people start a business, like whether they're in nutrition or they're in therapy or others, and they're kind of individuals who can only take as many clients as the time in the day that they're going to set aside to do it. And what can you do to grow that? You can charge more, you can, take on more days, but then there's a cap to that. And so I think a lot of people always are wondering, how can you take a business when it's kind of your time that's the primary and be able to make that more? And I think you have like an incredible story that talks about how you were able to take that and really scale this business. But I want to take one step back because I know that this wasn't like you didn't just start your own business. You also worked elsewhere, out of school. So just tell us like kind of your earlier career and how that maybe helped to influence your ability to be able to take this passion that you have in nutrition and to be able to grow it into such a large business.
Yes. So like I said, back then, nutrition wasn't so popular of a subject. They didn't really offer it in the college I went to in Stern. I actually I went through a few majors like most people, but I majored in marketing and business and advertising. And I interned at American Express. I got a paid internship. I was very proud of myself.
That's a really big deal.
Yeah. And I used to kind of sneak out of class early to go do that internship.
Can I ask you a question about that? Because a lot of times people want to know, they are in school. A lot of people listen to this podcast. They're people who are in school and they want to get a great internship and they have no idea where to turn to get a great internship. Maybe like getting an internship at American Express is a really big deal. So How did you get that?
Okay. I would say, and this is probably a big theme to this whole podcast, networking and connections and articulating things to people and speaking up for yourself. Oh, I'm actually looking for a job in that. Oh, are you looking for anyone? You have to advocate for yourself outside of your circle or wherever you are. Always speak up and ask. Same thing they say with, let's say, Shidduchim world or things like that. Like speak up for yourself. It happens to be that my sister, so talk about networking with my sister. She works for American Express. She actually still works for American Express for years. And she said that there was an opening for an internship and I applied through there. So yes, she is my sister, but it's still about connections, I would say, and keeping your ears open and advocating for yourself, asking around and really networking, because even these days, even more so, the way to get in the door is a lot to do with connections and things like that you're building.
And I think people often are, especially women, are afraid to ask because they're like, well, what if they say no? And I always say, okay, so they say no, then you're not any different than where you are right now, but you have to try. You have to ask, what's the worst case scenario? They say no. But I think it sounds like you just were like, this is what I want and this is what I'm going to go for.
Yeah, and even more so, we didn't discuss the books I wrote. I wrote 2 books, but through that world, I made other connections and friends. It's a lot of things even become friendships. One of them is Paula Scheuer, who's an amazing author herself, kosher baker. And she one time gave me business advice, and she said, it's not, unless it's a no, it's not a no. So it's sort of what you're saying, even more so, that actually keep asking until you get a no. So that was later on in my career with other things related to book writing. But it's, you have to, what's the worst that can happen is they say no. And you actually could say that to yourself like a mantra.
That's what you have to, I think you have to say that in your head to like get the courage to be able to go and ask.
But what if we said like, but what if they say yes? Like, isn't that such a more open energy?
Yeah, what if they say, that's a great energy to be able to have. I love that.
Yeah, that's the evolution and maturity.
There we go. So you have this, took this one elective, which is amazing. And so how do you decide to like start a business? Right. And I think that's also like people like, wait, just start a business. So tell us how you do that.
It still didn't happen yet. And the funny thing is nutrition as an elective course is not even talking about the food yet. It's a science, which I was always intimidated by. And I think that's another lesson for people is if you're passionate about something, you can overcome anything you're intimidated by or thought was a weakness at one point. It's really the passion that drives you through something that's challenging. And I then worked for American Express after college. So I got a job there in marketing, and I just felt like I showed up, and I always give my best, and I'm good at what I do when I commit to it. But I was working for somebody else. I didn't feel like I was changing the world. I was really, trying to have a place in that, in my tikkun, or what I'm here for is purposeful to help people. And I just was showing up, and I said, you know what? This nutrition thing, I would do research about the courses at Brooklyn College. I said, okay, well, it's local. I can always learn just for my family. I was trying not to put pressure on an end result. In the beginning, I was just saying, this would be nice to do anyway. And I had my first child, and I still was working consulting for American Express, which made me able to put myself through college without a master's. I ended up going back via the master's route. Wow. Yes.
Wait, what did you get your master's in?
Well, what happened was I mentioned that it wasn't it was an elective. It wasn't a subject. I was more in the marketing and advertising. It was more of an English major. It was an arts. It wasn't a science. Yeah. So I actually had to take all my courses over. So I had a longer road. So in Brooklyn College, they allowed me to do that. I don't know what it is these days, but on a master's level. Very nice. So I said, I might as well also get my master's, which is now required for dietitians. So I already did that. And again, that was more of a competitive edge back then.
At that time, did you do it because you thought you would need it to be able to start your business? Or did you think you'd go work for someone else? Like, what were you thinking in terms of career-wise?
I think I was a little bit, not lying to myself, but telling myself, you're just going to do it for your family. It's good to know about nutrition. But I feel like obviously, especially my personality, knew I was going to go into this field. And it was never going to be working for someone else because I was looking for what back then I understood to be work-life balance, which meant work for myself so I can choose my own hours, which always makes me laugh. You work way harder for yourself than anyone else.
Were you married with a child when you were doing your master's?
Yes.
And working?
Yes.
At the same time?
Yes. So I got married my last year in college. Wow. I'm since divorced, but I got married my last year of college. And then I had my first baby while I was choosing to go this other route. So I used to literally, especially first child days, I don't know if anyone knows those days.
I'm just like thinking to myself as you're talking, I'm like, okay, job at American Express, getting my master's, and having a baby. Yeah, I think it's like, okay, that's just like, I know, but especially at young, 20, whatever, how old you were, must have been young 20s, that's like, whoa.
Right, because I was a little bit of an OCD mom. I would take literally her huge baby swing, which I think they make, or they should be making way more condensed these days, and bring it to my mother-in-law, who would then babysit for her so I can go to class. But I wouldn't, you're not okay just handing over the baby. You got to bring all the equipment for 2 hours of your day. So it wasn't just a lot of juggling. It was, I need all my stuff and I need you to have my stuff. And it was a lot. But I did like 2 classes at a time and ended up being something that worked out you have to think it through. Like it worked out, it made sense. Let's say, oh, you know what? I'll go the extra step. I'll do my master's. Oh, but this program I can do, it's called a dietetic internship. I can make sure I do those courses I can on a master's level. Like that's another piece of advice I would give people is to always kind of like, don't limit yourself. Actually say, 1 second, is there anything else I need to know about this whole circle here that I can maximize what I'm doing?
Yeah.
I'm like that even with my time. Like, well, how can I make this time most efficient? And it's the same thing with going through steps like this, because next thing you know, you have a master's, you have your RD, you are like paving your way for your private practice. And that was only because I said, oh, you know what? Okay, let me just start. This is something that interests me. It's not going away. It didn't go away. Maybe that's another telltale sign. I was always interested. And I felt like it could be something I can do alongside having a family.
So
at the time.
It's interesting you brought that up, as you say, like trying to maximize each opportunity. I always, the advice whenever anyone asks me, and I always tell this to my own kids, is that if you have different choices to make, I always say, like, take the one that leaves as many options open to you as possible, right? Like that, because you really don't know what you're going to want, where you're going to be, and you close some of those doors that you may have wanted when in the future. And so, I think it makes sense. Like, okay, which one? I would say, like, which one gives you the most number of options in the future? So, like, having optionality is like a really great way to kind of, figure out things and helps to make decisions as you go through life.
And another thing along those lines for, let's say, a profession like this was my cousin, who's a very big doctor. She's a radiologist. Told me, Beth, you can never have enough credentials. Yeah. Back then, I was even more versus now, where I think it's a little flexible in areas you can go into.
It's all changing now.
Yeah, it's all changing.
Yeah.
It's the same thing as saying my mother growing up is like, you need a degree. Now it's like, I would say you need a skill.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because it's this a conversation that's happening in our house quite a bit. So my parents were very much like, my father went to Yale, like Cornell, Yale, like it was like college education was a really big deal. And that was like a big value that was passed on. For me, it was like, for sure, I went to college, I did really well. And then for my kids, I was like, for sure, they're all going to college. Mm-hmm. My boys, my girls, like boys want to learn for a little bit and then go to college, no problem, but they're going to college. And I found myself in like the last couple of years, like really revisiting that. And in fact, it's quite a discussion in my house. And my son, who's got like 4 credits left, who is like, why do I need to finish? And I'm like, well, we've already paid for 3 plus, a half years. So you can finish the last 4 credits. But my younger daughter, who's 21, she is like, she's halfway through and she's like, should I still continue? She's like, I feel like I should because everyone else is doing it. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, what are you going to do with it? Like, I can't believe I'm like changing my thought process around it, but it really is a different world. And even as a CEO who hires really, we're a tech company, so everybody's pretty highly educated. I would definitely hire somebody now who had great experience, who's super smart, who knew, if they told me that they know how to use all AI functions and didn't go to college, I would take the person who knew how to like leverage AI than someone who went to college. So like the world is really changing for
Absolutely.
Sure. And I don't think that everyone now needs to go, and I can't believe this is coming from me, but like, I think people have to think about, what is the college degree going to do for me in my career? Or, even education. You can get educated now in a lot of other ways than doing a 4-year college program.
Yeah, with expenses and loans and everything and that everything I basically that goes, paid off like 5
and
years
especially
ago.
It's time. It's your time and your money, which is so crazy. Okay, let's get back to your story. So which is amazing to me. You have a new baby. Yeah. You're getting your master's. You're working. Right. So how does it come to a place? And also, what was the pressure on you at that time as a young couple to have to bring in money? Because I think that's also a lot of young girls, if their husbands are learning or they're in school or they're just need 2 incomes in a family, there's a lot of pressure too that maybe they can't make the choices they want for the long term because they have to make sure that they can bring in some money in the short term.
That's a really great point. I'm happy to be very honest about that because that was one of those areas going into marriage that hit me very shockingly. I didn't know finances were something that was that eye-opening. I remember feeling very overwhelmed in it, even though it wasn't put on me to be overwhelmed in it, but I'm a partner in this marriage. Like, it's affecting me. I'm the wife. I'm not a child here. I need to figure out what's going on. It was something I actually just took upon myself in the process of this. I wouldn't say that was a factor so much early on, but as I started to expand quickly, more like what you were referencing earlier about you just going with it and having, how the business grew.
Yeah.
I started to then go with it because I was like, actually, I could really contribute to the finances here. And it felt really nice. So I think we've spoken a little bit about this, the fact that some people feel limited and they say, which is great, that's their goal. Like, I have 2 children, this is enough for me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm okay in doing this amount of work and I'm good. And that's totally, they're right. They're absolutely right, whatever they need to do. But they can open up their mind to see, actually, let me follow that next step. All you need to do is just follow. All I did in my whole career is just follow the next step that opened up for me.
So what was the first step in having a practice in nutrition?
The biggest decision was deciding whether or not to take insurances.
Okay.
Because I always knew.
You opened a practice, you started seeing, you just advertised, like, what did you do to let people know?
Good question. Through the internship, I was developing all my paperwork because, again, I always knew I was going to do this as a private practice. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew it was going to be mine. And again, for me, it was more about the work-life balance aspect and the ability to help people or have the most impact in a relationship with them. And so the biggest business decision, first and foremost, is which path you're going to choose, self-pay or insurance. It's gigantic difference, gigantic. I mean, we think of ourselves like we have insurance, like, oh no, do you accept my insurance? No, hang up the phone. Versus people who are willing to pay out of pocket. It's entirely different clientele.
And that's different because you self-pay, you make a lot more money. But
Not even necessarily. It's just a whole different model. Like, people who self-pay are ready to give money, ready to pay you. People who are insurance, you'll then also get people, oh, the insurance didn't pay you. Sorry. It's going that route of a lot of loss, but because you have the volume aspect of it, you have to rely on volume, you'll offset the loss. So it's over the years, then we'll get to my current life, it's a little bit of a burnout because you're working very hard and you're losing a lot, but you're also gaining a lot. And while that makes sense, that makes sense.
So just to clarify that, so basically, because if you accept insurance in these types of businesses, then more people will come because their insurance is going to pay. So, they could afford, in essence, to take on maybe what some people might feel is an extra. And that could be like massage therapy, that nutrition, even in general, like psychotherapy. A lot of times people so if their insurance will cover it, they'll go do it. But if it won't, they are not in a position to do it. Versus self-pay, meaning that people are coming and they're paying out of pocket, and maybe they'll get reimbursed by their insurance company, maybe they won't, but they're willing to pay. And so it's less volume, but a different type of client, like a higher level client, and less loss because you're getting the money up front as opposed to having to go do all of the. And I've heard a lot from people like what it is to have to. You almost have to hire someone else to go chase after the insurance companies to get reimbursed for everything.
You need billers, so you can't do it on your own.
So it's a whole different, so much more complex, but. The advertisement is we take insurance and then the floodgates open.
So from a business perspective, that works, especially back then, it wasn't common. I'm the one who figured out, maybe a couple of us, how to take such a broad range. I wasn't stopping. If I was going to take insurance, I was going to figure out how to take every single insurance I can take. And we did. We took a multitude of insurances, and that was probably the hot cake of what really grew me to start. What was amazing was I also developed a reputation. So they weren't only coming to me because I was taking insurance. It was because I was really good at what I do. And that allowed me to segue in my current days. But it was a big decision with self-pay. And also then people make the argument, are self-pay more motivated to change versus not? And I've gotten mentorships from other dietitians who charged a lot for their services for that idea. Like, I want people to be successful so they could be my walking advertisements. I'm going to charge them a lot. They're going to be more committed. So all I, again, cared about was my ultimate goal, which I think I keep going back to it because it is important for people to be clear, even if they pivot, even if it shifts. And it's important to regroup throughout your career and see if it shifted. And that's usually because you can start noticing either you're burnt out or something doesn't feel right anymore, or clientele you're coming are different than what you used to have, or something shifting. But so it's okay to change. But if you're clear on your goal, you can constantly go back and say, is this serving my goal? Is this serving my purpose? So for me,
I'm still doing it for the reasons I started.
I started, like I said, to try to help people and as many people as I could. So from a business perspective, yes, I can make it work with the volume, and I need it in order to make the numbers make sense. But from a clinical perspective, I was just being able to help more people, and they were able to come to me for way longer than anybody with self-pay would likely do. because there aren't caps, or especially back then, hardly any caps. And people could come to me for years for many. These days, it's less and less. They cap them at 6 visits, whatever it is. But whatever it is, they're able to get help they wouldn't otherwise have gotten. That's the people I really cared about helping. And they would come for longer than they needed, because I always said it takes sometimes more than 4 to 6 times to affect change.
So talk about how you opened your offices. So where was your first office? And then talk to us about, I believe you got up to like 7 offices, right? So like, what's this, like the path of like first office, second office? Like, what was that like, the risks that you took to be able to open up more and more offices?
Yes. So the things going through my head at the time were similar to what we're saying with starting school. It was like, okay, why not? Like, why not just do this? Or why, if it wasn't about overthinking, not that you have a tendency to overthink, but it's about kind of stopping the thoughts and being like, I'm just going to do it. And it's same along the lines of networking, building relationships. I also went to, at the time, this is what was popular, where there were speakers. There was like NYU speaker event about dietitian in private practice. And Carrie Gons was someone I went to. And I'm actually quoted with her in some media things now, which is funny because back in the day, I was looking up to her as a mentor. I still do. And one thing she said in her building a private practice was start anywhere. You just need basically a table and a corner of even your house, like just a corner of your house and a table, make it look nice and neat and professional, and you're good. So it was Brooklyn, and I had like a walk-in basement thing. It wasn't even a room. It was like a hallway behind the stairwell that I built a sheetrock wall to try to make some sort of like semblance looking like an office. So it's still between kind of like the garage and the steps.
So in your house?
In my house in Brooklyn.
And how many babies did you have at this point? How many kids?
At least 3.
At least 3 at this point. Okay.
At least 3, because I have a picture of Lavana, my 4th, in her little circle thingy in my office.
Okay.
So at that point, I must have been established because she's like working with me in my office. Oh, and the reason why it was in my house, other than overhead or whatever, or I don't know where this is going to go, was, again, my goal of work-life balance. I said, if I'm going to do this, I need to be able to go up and downstairs. My babies are little. I need to be home.
Yeah.
None of this, by the way, means that I was actually accessible. It's just that's kind of like the
you were there
jumping, but I was there, and I have crazy stories. Like my son had a febrile seizure. I'll never forget. I ran up from clients, so that's really extreme.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking, wow, my babies are young. Like I need to be home.
Yeah.
Which is along the lines of what I was saying before. That if someone feels like, okay, these are enough clients for me. I have 2 babies at home, and that's great. But again, maybe if your office was here, can you do more? Yeah. Or if you wanted to, it's possible. Is all I'm saying. So I worked in this little thing. I found a table that like literally comes up when I'm not working and like folds down when I am. Found an IKEA corner desk that fit in the corner. I had the old school file boxes.
Oh, I remember. Yes, for sure.
It's crazy what we used to use. I don't even know what files are in there. And then I developed the paperwork through my internship, my own stuff. And I started seeing clients. My first clients were via insurances. So yes, it was.
Did you put an ad in the, like, how'd you get your first clients? Because everyone always says, how do I get my first clients? Because once people know you're good in this stuff, then people refer and they say, oh, did you hear of Beth? Or did you hear of Beth? But getting those first clients whenever you have any of one of these businesses is the hardest thing to do.
Yes. First of all, remember that my background was marketing.
Yes.
So again, like you're saying, things happen for a reason, and nothing I did felt wasteful, which is great. And even now, even as I tried to hire maybe people to take things off my plate, when it came to marketing, they never really lasted because it really is my forte. Yeah. And I just end up doing it myself anyway, or I know how to do it better, and I rather utilize people for different skill sets that I'm not so strong in. But back then, there wasn't really social media. I built a blog at the time, so at least I had like a resource to start establishing my expertise. I don't know how many clients it brought in, but it started to have me out there. I wrote articles for free back then, and that was also big, the print magazines. Till this day.
You wrote articles for print magazines about nutrition, but they just wanted your certification. It didn't matter that you didn't have to have the practice. So it was like sometimes people have to have the practice and then they have that to be able to get the article. So you did reverse. You wrote the articles and then you
Yes, I wrote the articles because I would always just make sure they would give me the blurb on the bottom to call me. So that actually worked. Again, times have changed, but that was very big. And I till this day argue about, buying a printed and the return you get with how much they cost versus just writing an article, even if it's for free, and getting them negotiating a good byline, because you're establishing your expertise. So people are like interested in what you're saying, and they might come to you because they're like, oh, she knows, oh, that happened to me. And then they see your print on the bottom and you didn't pay for it. So yes, now these days I do things and I get paid, but back then you always wanted to weigh what would be your return. Like, is this something that can lead to X, Y, and Z? So I still think that there's a balance between get paid for what you do, but also know where you're starting at and understand there's other value that you can get from doing things. So I would say I wrote a lot of articles. If anything, I then pitched columns so people could know to find me. And a lot of people might still know me. I get stopped still from some of these magazines, these Jewish magazines. But also at the time, the referral sites were starting to get popular. So there was one at the time, let's say, called Health Profs, and they wanted you to be on it. So I kept negotiating 6 more months, and I got it free for a while. So, and it's something that actually worked. Meaning you never know that, especially if something's for free, no reason why anybody should not be utilizing it. I made sure my Google search was on, my business was on Google, all the free stuff. Honestly, all the free stuff from...
Did you spend any money on marketing, or you were like
really
very focused on what can I do for free? Did you barter anything? By the way. Did you barter? Do you ever barter like sessions? Because that's also, I say, like sometimes people who have a service that they're providing, could they barter that they'll provide the service in return for influencers posting them or a giveaway or an ad or something?
I think it's a little more common in this world today because I also have social media, so I do collaborations like that as an influencer. But back then, there's something about that for me when it came to counseling that felt a little bit blurred. It's a little interesting for me. I'm sure some people can maybe like have more formative lines, but it's the same thing as me counseling family. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, sure, like but it's an interesting spot to be in. I don't know if I've never done it. I just don't recall that being like kind of one of my strategic things to do. I just would either do it for free then for them or whatever. I just did. It's like a safe space kind of your counseling environment. And so I would say through these like referral websites, I built my own website. The insurances, having me as their, like someone you can go to. Oh, and then of course, doctors, starting to network with doctors. And I worked all ranges, especially with taking insurance. You can say that I work with everyone, diabetes, kids, adults, and then over time developed actual really good programs for each of those niches. So, but at the time, it was more like, everyone come, and I deal with that. Everyone told me that. That was another piece of advice. Just say yes, like you'll take them, unless, God forbid, you don't know what you're doing. And you'll see, what unfolds by just being open, and then you'll find your way in it.
That's really smart, because it also applies into in other businesses. It's like, okay, who else are they going to that may need my service? So in your case, it was, okay, if they're going to the doctor and they need nutritional help, then it's the doctors that could refer. But like thinking of, let's say, someone who's in like makeup or, laser or something like that, it could be, you could go like other people in that field that those people are seeing, then they might say, oh, you need laser, or you need a makeup artist, and they could refer one another. So it's actually really smart to think about whatever business you have, like who are your clients going to is other professionals, and how do you network with them, and how do you create like a referral program? Because that's very, that's a great advice for people trying to build this business.
Yes, it still goes back to that building relationships, like piece that I mentioned. And it's a funny story. Years ago, when people were putting advertising on everything, someone contacted me from a pizza box, and I was like, that's so weird. Why would you contact me for a pizza box? And I think it was like my husband at the time was like, what do you mean? That's a great place to put a post for a dietitian. And I was like, oh, I can't.
Because the people who need the nutrition are eating the pizza. That's really funny.
I never did dirty things like that. Just didn't feel right. And then over time, you get a reputation. People's results speak for themselves. People, like they say, they can't wear, you can't wear, or you're wearing, your results.
You look great. Yeah. What'd you do? Right.
That kind of thing. Or if I see also people with diseases and medical conditions, and you start to build your referral network within your clients, which is the best way to do it.
That's super smart. Okay, so back to taking that step, how long did it take you to open up a total of like 7 offices? And what was the hardest thing along the way of like doing that scale?
Okay. I mentioned that I just started going with it.
Yeah.
So I would first say about not only accepting insurances, but just trying to constantly find new insurances, or someone would call and say, do you take this? I don't know. Do we? Let's figure it out.
Yeah.
And it takes months and it's very hard and you got to negotiate. It's not easy to like get into a network and all that. It takes time too. And over time, I just felt like I wanted to grow, or people would ask me, why aren't you here, or things like that. So my main base was in my house and in Flatbush, and I was having babies and all that talk. So I wasn't interested in going anywhere because that would starting to open me up. I would say that people really need a very good accountant in their life.
Yeah.
Or accountant / mentor in that area.
Were you good at finances? Like,
No.
I know a lot of times people, that's their weakness, especially women, but all entrepreneurs, like I find that like the financial pieces are really like, they almost like, I don't even want to see it because I don't want to know.
Yeah.
As opposed to like, it clearly is one of the most important things you need to be able to grow your business.
For sure. And unfortunately, it's a little bit of a limiting belief for me. So I always work through that these days, where I really do know what I'm talking about. It's just more I'm feeling like I don't, or I don't feel as confident. But Mr. Zell, a lot of people might know him, he passed away. And Zell and Etta Jerry was my accountant. And I used to walk in and I didn't know what was flying. I just was doing my thing and I was following
money,
it.
whatever. Most of the time it's like, well, do I have money in the bank? And
and
that's
I
how
was
much
like,
money my business
good.
is making.
I really didn't understand. It just was, again, because I was just going with it. I was following the growth, and he would just always compliment me. He's like, I don't know what you're doing, but you just got to keep doing it. I'm like, okay. And then, little notes like that. It's not like we had big conversations, but over time, I would also ask him sometimes business advice. Like, I really want to open offices. And he would say, your base office is your strongest foundation. He didn't necessarily advise or discourage it. He just was like, don't get lost in the growth.
Yeah.
I was like, no, I still want to do it. So I did things with very low overhead. I would always find something that was either a day rate or something I could get out of quickly. I never really signed like full leases, maybe a month to month. And so my risk, I would try to mitigate the risks. I would test the spot. I call them more like pop-ups for marketing wise.
Yeah.
And I first started in the city to see if I would get like the working men on their hours. And this is before the virtual world, keep in mind. So really now I likely would grow more virtual space, but and I do with online courses and whatnot. But back then, the only way to really grow was to try to physically add locations.
Yeah.
And so I did. I remember 34th Street. This is also back when like WeWork type things were becoming popular. Yeah. So this is all the change of the time. Yeah. So I negotiated with somebody my husband knew at the time in real estate, like just very low overhead, like I said, or paying even by the day and seeing. And that's where it started. And then I started to see that it wasn't even necessarily have to be there all season. It could be like pop-ups based on seasons, like seasonal pop-ups that you kind of make your money, make your business. And then when the summer goes, you leave too. You don't have to stay. Everything can look good from a marketing perspective because it's not like you're closing. It just was a pop-up.
But was it always only you in the office, or you also had to get like a front desk person? Like,
oh, yes.
Did you have other nutritionists with you?
So my Sarah, I have to give her a shout out. Sarah, now she's Sarah Casson. She was Harari at the time. She's my assistant for 12 years. It's only recently that I've moved the practice to being out of insurance to self-pay that I took a huge step back from the volume, and I want to have my hand in everything again. It's like kind of going back differently. But I had a few assistants before then. I started realizing you have to recognize your own strengths and either weaknesses or things you just don't want to deal with and won't be good at. And if someone's not answering the phones and getting clients in, then there's a problem. Yeah. And I didn't really want to do that. I felt that was very invasive to my family life if I have to always be answering phones. So right away, I didn't overthink. And a lot of people do, I find, the money that I have to now put aside to pay someone. It was like a no-brainer to me and all those little steps and smart decisions were what made me grow in the end. So it's a little bit to pay for you to be able to grow. And so I got assistants, and I called them assistants, and they would largely like do the appointments and the bookings and all that. I was doing the billing myself to start, and that was like my whole Friday. And then I realized I can't do this. It's all back. And then even when things were getting denied, I wasn't following up So like that's another no-brainer. You can't not get paid in your business. So between getting clients in, so I need somebody, getting paid, I need somebody.
Yeah.
So that was the first ones, was an assistant and a biller. And I knew right away to start, I wanted in-house billing. We all have to figure this out together. No one knew about nutrition then anyway. Paying someone outside, I might as well utilize them as also kind of an assistant while she works. So I was being efficient with my workers. And from there, I think when I had that infrastructure and realized the evenings are, let's say, getting hard for me, or evenings are very popular and people want more, because I started with 2 evenings, I said, oh, this is popular. We have the clientele. Why don't we hire someone for it? So I said, great, if there's demand, and then I would hire someone just for an evening. So then there was me and someone else just for evenings. I also
took on someone else, like another nutritionist?
Another dietitian. Yes.
Okay.
Start just scaling back a second. I actually took on interns, which is very smart for people if they want to scout who they want to work for them, and also sort of have trained.
Very nice.
It's a great way to see if someone has potential and you already trained them when they were there. So that was another area and you're helping them and they want to be there, and it's great. So I took on something called dietetic interns, which is part of the internship process. So they're serious, they get graded, it's part of their course, they have to show up. And they would shadow me and whatever. And many of them I hired. Until this day, I went to coffee with 2 of them and we were like, how long have we known each other? 20 years, we realized, one of them.
So let me ask you though, so if you had 7 offices, then you had to have a number of dietitians or whatever working for you to be able to fill. Were all of those offices like fully booking clients all at the same time? Like, and then were you managing that? Like, that just sounds like a lot to be doing.
Yes. So I wouldn't say at one time there was more than, let's say, 4. At one point there was Tom's River, there was Crown Heights, there was, I tried in Williamsburg. I tried both sides of Williamsburg to see the different clientele that would want to come. And it would be some of my dietitians rotating. Yeah. Oh, I even had 5 towns. And it would be me trying not to have to go, but also sometimes recognizing, and that's something you were referencing, that I am my brand. Yeah. And they still might want to see me. But I made everybody train under me for at least a month. And I built them in my philosophy. And I made sure I looked for a certain personality type. So between all that, they had different kind of routines where they went to different offices, or they were able to just like hire someone for like a 5 towns location. So it depended.
Wow. So that's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. So now the big question I'm sure everyone's thinking is, okay, now at what point, how many children do you have at this point? How were you like running your home? It's so much headspace to build, to have employees underneath you. And it's like medical area. So it's not even, it's other people's lives, which is even, more pressure. And you're running your own home. And where did you live at the time?
Brooklyn.
Brooklyn. Okay. So how did you do all that? Like what was going on for you at that time?
Yeah. I did start hiring, let's say, mother's helpers, even on top of a live-in housekeeper at the time, I remember. So if it was evening hours, I would automatically say I need someone there. Because, again, I mentioned I go run upstairs for whatever reason, but you really can't. You're focusing on work. And when I started to feel that kind of stress of being pulled in many areas, I just ended up getting a mother's helper. And so I would evolve things like that. As I noticed, my kids need someone there more than just a housekeeper. I have to hire somebody. And then that went to me only working 1 evening, because I realized I actually really need, as they're getting older, they need me more in the evening. So I could only work 1 evening. But then I would hire somebody. So then I had 1 full day dietitian into an evening, another evening dietitian. I even had Fridays for a very long time. I was following the growth, like I said, and the volume. If there was clients, I was opening another day.
Wow. But like, how did it all get done? So, and I think also the hardest time, and I remember this even for myself, was when I was growing my company. It was that time between where the company wasn't making enough money that I could go hire really help at home. But it still required so much time. Like you were talking about Fridays that you did your billing. I remember doing my books, all my bookkeeping, like staying up, pulling an all-nighter every Saturday night. And that's what I did until I could hire someone to be able to do that. Yeah. And it took me a really long time before I hired somebody to help me, like a housekeeper or whatever, in the home. Like that took a really long time for me to be in that place. So I think a lot of times, and I see this all the time with people trying to build a company, or even if they have a big career, is like that challenge of trying to keep their home, doing all the cooking, being there for all their children, then having like a full day. And sometimes a career where you go in the morning and you come back in the evening and you shut down and you're done is easier sometimes than being an entrepreneur,
Right.
where the business is on your head all the time. And especially if you have clients in the evening, whatever else. So like, was that hard for you to do all of that? And did you have a time where it was like this in between where you were in a position to be able to hire people at home to take some of the work off at home? Like, how'd you think about all that?
The thing is about workers at home never take the place of you. So you still always feel like there's a lot for you to do or you're very needed. I would honestly say that I had my computer open a lot.
Yeah.
I don't remember ever not having my computer open kind of thing. I think my kids got used to that. I'm not saying that was right or whatever, but that's the reality is the only way to get work done is if you're working.
Yeah.
And you're working there. And that was definitely very hard. Sunday, there were periods, I'm not sure how often, but that I could recollect that Sunday mornings, I would go early to like a coffee shop for 2 hours because my husband would be home on Sunday. I never asked him to take off on a normal work day, but on Sundays, there were periods of time that I would just get a lot of work done Sunday morning at a coffee shop. Back at night, it's basically every hour that you can open up your computer, you're opening it.
Yeah.
And that's really the only way.
What about like cooking for Shabbos? Did you have guests?
I wouldn't say so often, I'm going to be honest with you.
Yeah. You can't do everything.
You can't.
Something has to give.
You cannot do everything.
Yeah.
You cannot do everything. I did like when I hosted, I maybe hosted a Shabbat Brachot here or there. But it wasn't like a natural feeling like, oh, they're going to have guests this week. It could happen, but I didn't even think to even invite. By the time I would think it's Friday at 4:00 and I'm like, oh, we should have invited guests today. But like, you can't think of everything. I think I just had a routine with that. That I either cooked, I was always working Thursday, so that would just be Friday morning rush.
Yeah.
Friday mornings were always a rush. Now I actually shifted my schedule. I got smart. I never did this before, but more my Thursday, Friday, I try to leave a little open. And I'm like, oh, what a difference that I have 2 days that I could kind of decide where I'm going to cook. But it would be Friday morning. I always cook Shabbat dinner. I always cook dinners. I mean, obviously I do nutrition, so I didn't want anyone taking over my food. But I would just tell people to try to automatically, like as they make money, you're going to have to put some towards areas that can help you. You shouldn't feel like you have to do it all. It's not human and normal, especially if you want to last long term. But even so, to make the point that nothing ever feels easy. It's always going to feel like work.
I just remember there was a time, and my younger kids wouldn't remember this, but my older kids did. I remember there was a time where we had a lot of growth, and they came home and was like, where are we ordering from tonight? Because there was no way, like there was no bandwidth for me to be able to cook. And, or they still talk today that they remember when my husband would make dinner and he was limited. I know a lot of people have their husbands that make, really great dinners, but, he tried, but it was either salami and eggs, or they talk about remember those like pierogies that were in the frozen pierogies in the box, and they would put them in, or they would talk about how Dunkin' Donuts was like sitting on the table, which, obviously wasn't ideal, but I didn't really, at that time, like I didn't have a choice. Eventually those things changed, and now they would never believe, because we never bring in takeout ever. Right. But like you do what you could, whatever you can do. So I want to change just topics a little bit and just talk about drivers and sacrifices, because there's trade-offs, in everything. And so was your driver still to like help as many people as possible, even when it was potentially harming your time with your own family? And was there also like financial drivers? Because I know for a lot of people, that's like they need to grow their business. They need to do it because they need it for financial reasons. So I'm just like curious of your drivers and the sacrifices that you made for them.
Yeah, those are good points. The finances was definitely a motivation when I started realizing how overwhelming it was. But at the same time, I started realizing it's way above my head, regardless of how hard I'm going to work, and to put myself that kind of pressure when it's what it is. It's like, well, you got to pivot and figure something out. Either negotiate with people or talk to them. Like you shouldn't feel like you have to take that whole thing on your own. Like meaning kind of like if I had to look back, I wish we kind of took a step back at our finances and did it a different way of saying, where can we budget better? Or we never had those communications about finances. And because I think it's overwhelming to think that you can have that kind of control over making enough to make everything work in our type of like Jewish lifestyles.
Yeah.
Thank God, a lot of kids, gigantic tuition bills. It's not necessarily something that I feel should be the motivation. I think it should still come back to, it'll be great to contribute and help, but we have to also figure out where our finances are, because then you feel a lot of pressure trying to chase that, thing. And I don't know how you're ever catching up from most of these expenses. But I definitely sacrificed things. I would get really tired at night, even till now. Now it's like I couldn't function at night. There were a lot of affairs I would miss, or I would go and hardly be like human because I need to go to sleep. So I think socially you miss out, even socially, like moms socially.
Yeah.
And then also there's a disconnect with people. I remember going to a shiur or a class, finally getting into a lunch shiur from a woman doing a women's class. And I finally could, carve out 20 minutes and in Brooklyn parking because I'm in the middle of clients and not necessarily everyone else worked around me, or they didn't have kinds of work to my extent that I was doing. And I just always felt a little bit like a disconnect in where we were. And so that was always like kind of a sacrifice. It didn't feel like we're connecting. The story that she was telling was about being home for your kids' buses at 3:00. And I remember feeling like I'm working, and I'm feeling very bad about myself right now, but I'm working. And her point was something different about kind of like, if you can, don't just not be there for your children because you want to run an errand or see a friend. But I'm like, I'm working and I need to work. And you start to rely on those finances, and it's hard. It's hard. I think that socially was a big sacrifice for me. But then even the disconnect socially.
Yeah. And I know you mentioned that you're now divorced, and it's been a number of years, and you went through, that was very, very difficult for you. And now you're a single mom, still raising your 6 children, and running your business. Maybe talk a little bit, if you could share a little bit about going through that for those that are in that situation. And also just knowing that you at that time still had your own business. Was that something that was helpful for you as you went through that, or was it, in some ways harder for you?
It's a great question. So much about Hashem and how he paved this path for me in business became even more mind-blowingly clear through my divorce. The fact that I even had money in a bank saved, because as much as I contributed, I wasn't the sole provider of the family. I was able to save. And I would never have been able to, or thought that meant anything. I wasn't so connected to all those aspects back then because I had a partner. And it became me like crazy clear that it wasn't just that I had a profession and I can use my skills and do what I need to do for my portion of the expenses and everything I need to do to now raise my 6 kids. But I had money saved in order to take me through that process, which was very grueling. And that's huge. All the money went used towards it that I had saved. And I was like, wow, this is so clear why I had it and how it was used. So first of all, about the concept of having your own money and making your own money. And for us, it wasn't that my husband didn't have access to it or it wasn't a family money, but the reality was that I had my own money, and how much for me in the end that I needed it for this reason. Everyone should need things for good reasons, but there's something to you having money.
Did it also make a difference being able to have confidence that you could make your own money? Because, unfortunately, I know a number of women that probably would choose to divorce, but they're scared because they don't feel like they can provide for themselves. Yeah. They're so reliant on that. Did that make a difference for you? That wasn't even part of it?
It's more came up later where I recognized that. I actually started something called the Batya Initiative for single moms because of that point. One thing is that point, recognizing that people aren't starting with the foundations that I had in terms of a career or even the knowledge of a career or working. And at the time, you just feel like everyone else feels, where you just feel broken, actually not confident at all. You don't think it's going to ever be enough. And definitely aspects of my business slipped in terms of catching things. There was a big billing issue at one point, and you just overlook things where you're not so astute. Your little things slip away. So definitely I found things slipped in the terms of the billing aspects of it that I had to catch up with over time. So my business definitely was affected from that angle. But yes, knowing that, especially people around me would give me confidence in that, like, Beth, you have a career, you have, degrees, like you can do it. But even if I didn't, anybody can do it. They can always learn a skill. It's that you're right, that they need the confidence that I can do this and the acceptance that I need to do this, and I can, because we're all in these positions for a reason. We were put here so we can do it. And so absolutely, my mother raised me saying, you always need a degree. We talked about the degree, but back then you always need a degree because you never know what can happen. And we always want great things to happen. And
now we could say you always need a career.
Yeah,
like I would say now you always need a career and there's multiple ways, I guess, now to have a career.
Exactly. Yeah. Now I would say you always need a career or a skill set.
A skill, yeah.
Because you don't know what can happen. And it's eerie, but it's true. And so it became a whole new meaning for me with having followed this path through my divorce. And I allowed that journey to actually open me up to evolving the practice and realigning with everything that has shifted me in that process. So now I work self-pay and I choose clients just like they choose me. And I work through emotional well-being when it comes to food and body image and try to help with emotional blocks people could be having that are limiting them from losing weight. And I basically took a step back and asked myself, why do people come see me? Like, why are they seeing me? Because now thank God, it's great. I mentored a lot of them, but people do nutrition. A lot of other people take insurance. So the model also shifted. It was no longer working. I couldn't hire good employees because I even was thinking, why would you work for me for that pay? It's just that I couldn't pay them more because insurance never changed their threshold and all the expenses are going up. I just said, it's not working anymore. And so the way I evolved it was saying, why do they choose to see me? And that's a really nice conversation to have with yourself because you have to say, well, they love to like how I connect with them and they feel inspired by me. And I really know how to get at the root issues. And I understand that it's more than just food. And okay, so how can I build this out? Well, I can help work through those blocks of why you're really not reaching your goals. Just like when everyone comes to me all my years saying, I know what to do with food, I just can't do it. I'm answering that question with you. Because that's not okay. And you should be able to. So we need to figure that out. And now without the limitations of insurance, I could spend as much time with them as I want because there was insurance limitations on time. I get value out of what I get paid. So I feel like, investing that kind of time, they reach out to me personally and directly, and it actually feels more liberating than anything. So if people are feeling burnt out or they're feeling misaligned, especially when it's been so many years, like in anything, this was 15 years of practice. And you think they say every 7-8 years things shift for you. Yeah. So of course you're going to shift in business. It doesn't mean you hate what you do anymore. Yeah. It just means whatever it is not working for you anymore. But a lot of things in your life are not working anymore. I lost a marriage too. I mean, it's time to look at my practice and see what I want to do that it can reignite this passion that I started with of the reason why people were coming to me. So
that's great. And also just relooking at your business because what worked before, the world changes, and just keeping everything fresh. Okay, so a couple of questions for you. What was the biggest mistake that you made along your journey, and what'd you learn from it?
I would say it's this miss of the insurance. I would call it a blip. There was a billing issue. Insurance is audit your notes, and there was something that was missing from them that I thought would sort of get resolved with my staffing. And it didn't. And it went deeper hole to the point where I had to get a healthcare lawyer, had a divorce lawyer in my life, was even consulting with other lawyers. I had like 3 lawyers in my life at a time. I'm like, Hashem, what are you telling me? There's a lot of lawyers. And that was a mistake, that you need a hand in every aspect of your business. It's your business. And before that was going through the divorce. So it was like, honestly, just impossible for me. But before that, we were having weekly meetings and check-ins, and I was a breath of everything. You have to have those check-ins, as hard as that might be, especially I'm speaking women, work, mom, balanced life, to now also have, you mentioned management earlier, and to now have this management aspect and you needing to speak to your biller, look at the numbers once a month, go check in on your books, see what's missing. You need to be doing that.
Yeah, and you need to be on top of everything. Yeah. Okay. Well, you know what? Those sometimes things give, like, you have to.
Yeah. God was ready for me to let it shift. Yeah.
So kind of on the flip side of that, when you look through this great career, like what was the greatest moment? Like, is there one moment where you're like, wow, like I did this?
I mean, what came through my mind just now, like kind of made me want to cry, is just all the amazing moments I have with clients, like those breakthrough moments that I feel like so happy for them because I understand how liberating that can be. And that's like the most rewarding part. And it's really beautiful for me to have that answer because that was my initial goal. And to know that what gives me the most happiness is knowing how much I've impacted them in ways beyond weight, which is my point now in what I do, is that it goes way beyond weight. Usually the story with food is not only about food.
Yeah.
It's so much more that are being blocked. And I was able to see that over time and to know that I impact them when I hear that back is you can't put a price on that.
Yeah. What was the best advice you ever got?
So I said a few of them, throughout this podcast, like you can never have enough credentials, never, unless it's a no, it's a yes kind of thing. A lot of tidbits like that. Just start, like when I mentioned starting in your office, just start wherever you are. My accountant telling me that just your base is your strongest foundation, like your home location. Just make sure that's very strong. I constantly seek advice from people who know more than me.
Those are all really great pieces of advice.
Yeah, like I really do have a lot because that's who I surround myself with. And it also makes you ignore people who really don't know what they're talking about. So,
next question for you. What failure are you most grateful for today? Because we all have failures. So it's funny because I was talking to, while you're thinking about that, I was talking to one of my kids the other day, and I said, like, successful people have successes and failures because they're opportunistic and they go out and they try, as you said, a whole bunch of different things. If you're not failing, then you're not going to be successful because that means like you're not doing enough. There's not enough volume. You need to have some failures, successes, and I just say, just fail fast.
Right.
But like sometimes those failures are like what make us who we are today. So what is the one you're most grateful for?
I mean, I think I'm still going to say the billing one because it really forced me to relook at the entire model. And if it was just going and going and going, I probably wouldn't have been honest with myself of how burnt out I was getting in the model. Because like I said, you could no longer hire great staffing. And in terms of dietitians, I couldn't do that same model. And then it was all falling on me. And then you're feeling like it's too much work. So it kind of was a time that I was forced to relook at things. So I would say that. I would actually honestly even say my marriage in a way where that also forced me to relook at myself and evolve. And what I do, I'm really grateful for. It aligns with me. I not only said I am my brand from an outside thing, and I actually did that on purpose. It was called Beth Warren Nutrition for a very long time. I built my brand. I was my brand. It was another big business decision. Do you want to be the face of your brand? Do you want to be behind the scenes of your brand? I have a personality. I like camera. I wanted to be out there, and it makes people connect with me more. But along those lines, who I am, my most aligned self is what I give to other people. It's what attracts people to me. So I was feeling very misaligned in many areas of my life. And even seeing it in the clients I was attracting, it wasn't even working because it was very misaligned. So, I mean, that's a massive, I wouldn't even call it a failure. It was just like a rug, being pulled out from under you. I don't know. I don't think of things as failures. I think of them as like, okay, God, moments. But I was forced to find my alignment, and in that shifted my practice. It goes hand in hand for me. Like everything I do with my work is aligned to me. So
we didn't even talk yet about your books that you wrote. Like, to write, like, what was that? Like, what made you decide to write the 2 books?
I always loved writing, advertising, English communications. I don't know, Stern called it 100 labels of what a major it was. So I did take a lot of arts and literature. I always enjoyed writing. I made it as a business decision. There's 2 reasons why people write a book in my types of fields. It's either because you're so huge, you might as well write a book. It gets you bigger or whatever, speaking engagements, and the people are going to pay to see you, or it actually launches your platform. And especially my first one, did it to help launch me. So you asked in the beginning, how did I help market myself? I mentioned writing articles. I took that a step further to say, why can't I write a book? And why can't I is another mantra I told myself, especially the early years. Now I don't use it so much, or why not me? whenever you would doubt yourself or you say, oh, she's blah, 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 I would say, I don't know, but why not me?
So I love that.
Yeah.
And I've had other guests that have said that same thing, that was their motivator. If so-and-so can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
Like, why can't I?
Yeah.
Like, it's changing it, in your head.
Yeah.
Of course you can.
Yeah, why not me? It's those types. That's really what got me through a lot of times. And I thought the same thing about a book. And I said, I'm going to do it. And I researched agents. At that time, I actually found a publisher first. It was very interesting the way I did it. And then I found my agent after. So I kind of did the work for her at the time. And I put out a book, but again, for more of this platform builder, I got speaking engagements and I got a PR. So that's when I started my media, and I was getting TV and being on Fox News and doing demos. And I loved that stuff. That kept it fresh. That kept it interesting. It catered to my creative side. It gave me good footage to use in marketing. And that was really fun. The second book I'm even more proud of, because that was more my strategy that still exists today. It was 2018, and I've always had consistency in me, and even if you evolve, you're consistent as a human and a strategy. And even that got more PR. So I did even more news.
Was it hard to write a book? Like, was that whole process? Because I think it's I don't know, I've got like 2 books that I've thought about for probably 15 years now. Like, one day I'm going to do it, but it just seems like really overwhelming and like a big thing to do.
For the self-help genre, what worked is that you can pitch and you don't have to have the whole book written yet. So you have to write a couple sample chapters in the book proposal, but then when they set their deadline, they accept it, and you said it takes 6 to 9 months to write, you're like, shoot, I gotta do it. So then you gotta do it. So for me, that deadline worked.
Yeah.
I'm a deadline-oriented person, and I had to do it. So that worked for me. Other fiction or whatever, I think you need the whole book written. You would have to be very, very disciplined for that type of life. And I'm writing a 3rd book, and it's also a self-help book, and that I want to do a little different. I want it to come organically. I want the feel to be, again, I'm more into this like more emotional space, and I'm looking for the creative side to be in that more. So it's purposely going more slowly until I feel it's ready. And it's sort of like anything, like having a baby or like finding a home. Like it happens in its right time. Yeah. So whenever the book is meant to reach its people, it'll reach it. So it's definitely a different process this time.
Hey, back to our questions. What would you say your superpower is?
Being authentically myself.
That's a major superpower. I think that'd be really hard for a lot of people to say that.
Yeah, and I work on it. It's not easy. You have to constantly realign with yourself, like mantras and journaling and all that stuff that I got even more into over the years. You have to stay connected to yourself. It's also how you prevent burnout and keep yourself happy.
What would you tell your younger self?
You already have it. Like you already have it, you just need to keep going. I felt a little bit I was chasing, or especially in the early years, you feel like you need to do everything, or this idea of following that next step, but taking that too far and doing everything and feeling like you need to be everywhere. And even if you take an obvious example of, let's say, the networking events or things like that, and feeling like FOMO, and you have to feel like you have to show up somewhere and you're so tired and you're like, is this really giving me anything? But no, I got to go. So for what? It's knowing the validation ultimately comes from you within yourself. Like you really have to find that connection within yourself. It's like a healing journey. Entrepreneurship, like it's, again, for me, it's one and the same. It's not just confidence. It's coming from you, recognizing your honest reasons for what's driving you, and telling yourself you don't have to prove anything. You just have to do it because you're good at what you do.
That's great. That's so motivating. I know we talked a lot about that you weren't really so afraid. You were just kept telling yourself, why not? But is there one thing when you look back at this journey that you were really afraid to do, but you did it anyway?
I'm thinking, I definitely was always nervous when I would go on news shows and things like that, acting like I wasn't nervous. When you do like these news shows, you have to bring all the food yourself, all the equipment yourself. this might work with some of the answers to some of the other questions. I one time was, a lot of these new shows, you get there and depending on the timing for you, have to be ready in 5 minutes and you're like, have to prep all this food out and get everything ready and they don't care. They're like, you're on in 4 minutes. And I was with actually an intern, luckily came at the time. It was for Fox, like the Fox segment that's after the morning show, that other slot. And I was doing something with a blender. And I always, especially back then, now I'm pretty, I don't know if it's good or bad, but I bring one item. But back then I would bring doubles and things just in case. And I bring an intern and I was like overly ready. And as I'm being wheeled on stage, grabbing my blender, I realized I forgot a piece of it. And luckily my intern's like, no, I have mine. And it was like her Ninja and I use a Vitamix. And if anyone knows anything about those worlds, they are not the same machine. And it's like a food processor that if you don't click it right, it doesn't turn on. And this is live. I forgot to mention that. It was a live show. So even though you don't want to mess up on a taping, it was live. And I just remember praying. I don't remember even what I said because I'm thinking in my brain, Hashem, make this turn on. And luckily, whatever it is, I did, and it turned on. I don't even know how. I still don't know how to use the machine. But that's scary. I even tell my kids this because especially my son, who's very competitive in sports, that I say I embrace the butterflies because I said I always know that something amazing is going to happen. Because the only amazing thing happens when you're so uncomfortable. It's like, it's the only way that great things happen. And a lot of that drive, and I guess I don't really so much to the question of being crazy nervous is because I always did sports. I was a big into sports. I danced my whole life. And I even now still play softball and I even box. I do boxing fights. I'm all over. But in softball, we have a women's softball league in Deal, New Jersey. I moved back to the Jersey Shore after the divorce, and I'm from there originally, the Syrian community. And the softball, you're on stage and you mess up and you realize nothing's going to happen. And even going to dance classes while I was in college still at Broadway Dance Center, I remember every time I felt intimidated, I would purposely go in the front. On purpose.
That's amazing.
Because I'd say, so what's the worst that's going to happen? You look like a fool, like no one's expecting you to look good. And if they have an opinion about it, then they could make themselves feel better because if you messed up, that's fine. You made someone else's day. And I got stronger in that as I got older because I would see so many insecurities in front of me with people and try to get them confident enough to go to the gym or whatever it was when they were like, a lot of people feel insecure to go to the gym. And I'm like, you're doing this for yourself. We have to. I
love that. I think that's great advice. I guess it's interesting because reflecting on what you're saying is sometimes like those butterflies or those uncomfortable, especially when you're going, up in front of other people. And it's interesting because I guess for me, I don't necessarily think about what other people are going to think. I think that's not something that's a driver. I don't really focus so much on that. But I guess it's like my own standard that I have for myself of whatever I take on, I want it to be done in a certain way. And like the nervousness of almost like, okay, am I going to do it as well as my expectations are? It's like my own that I put on myself.
Right.
But I still definitely hear you. And we talk a lot, like you have to put yourself in situations that are uncomfortable so that you could grow. But like you said, it could be uncomfortable because it's coming from within and your own kind of, are you going to be able to meet your own standard? Or, for a lot of people, it is like, what's everyone else going to think? So that's like a really important thing that my biggest piece of advice, and yours is probably too, is do not live your life for other people. You do, wasting your energy, worrying about what other people are going to think is like the first thing, after that, then it's working on your own self, right? Mm-hmm. Which is like probably giving yourself permission, which as we're talking, I'm thinking for myself is giving myself permission that not everything I do has to be, at the level, and it's okay if some things, don't hit that. So.
Yeah, I find that very interesting. I think it could come from two angles. I feel more about, let's say, what other people you feel within your own standards. I think that's a very big distinction that people could have. Yeah, you're like one or the other.
Yeah,
in that aspect.
But they both can cause that uncomfortableness. But maybe if you have no uncomfortableness, then your ego is just really too big.
Right. And also a friend actually once helped me recently work through something where she said, think of how you're going to feel after. Because everything that you do that's new or different or unknown is going to make you feel, let's call it anxious.
Yeah.
The question is how do you think you're going to feel after, or how do you want to feel after? And if it's like, no, I'm going to feel like I'm amazing. I was able to, speak in front of all those people. So that's what you should focus on. And that's how you know it was good. If it gives you more anxiety to think after, like, oh no, I don't know, they were talking about a topic that I honestly don't even, there was actually an article one time that I saw the way the woman was asking the line of questioning, kind of making it out to be that my book was about anorexia, which was like, did you read the book? I had like one of those moments. I actually hung up and called my PR person. I said, I got a vibe. I think they're trying to skew my answers. They were trying to like pinpoint Jewish communities and anorexia. It was not wasn't even anything to do with my book. And I was right that even though I was so careful because I was alert on what was going on to be very choice with my words, she still tried to shift the angle. That didn't feel right. There's a different
You're touching
feeling
on something really interesting, because I was thinking about that as I was coming over, because of course I've shared with you that even doing video podcasts is not necessarily my comfort zone, but I feel like it's important to do. And it's good to stretch ourselves outside of our comfort zone. But I love what you said, which is if you're feeling that feeling inside, that uncomfortableness, think about it once you're done with it. I love that, how you'll feel afterwards, because I do think that could be the distinction between, am I feeling this because maybe something's not right and I shouldn't do it? Or I'm feeling this because I'm just uncomfortable, I need to push myself.
Yeah.
So I've never heard that piece of advice. I love that. And I think that's a great way, because people really count on their intuition quite a bit. And sometimes they think that uncomfortableness is telling them that they shouldn't take on that challenge.
Right.
But it's really maybe not be. And using that as a way to decide, what type of uncomfortable is this, to know like how would you likely feel afterwards, is actually a great way to decipher between. So that is great advice. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Okay, last two questions for you. Has this journey been very lonely for you?
Oh, that made me like sad for myself a second.
Well, I think though, I could say that I think I talk to women who've built big careers, especially Jewish women, especially religious Jewish women, who absolutely have said that there are times that are lonely within the career, because there are a lot more anomalies. There are not so many religious Jewish women who have built big businesses.
Yeah.
And we're trying to find them, and we're bringing them on and bringing them together, but it's not necessarily so common. And if you're in your kids' class and they're all the moms, what percentage of them are, worrying about like the fact that they need to be even at work, like how many, or have a rigid schedule, or can't just, their focus isn't what new clothing line came out for their kids that day, because they're, have a pile of emails waiting for them. Like, so there is, I think a lot of people have a lonely journey.
It's like what I said before about the sacrifices and sitting in a class and just feeling very disconnected from like what other people might be feeling right now, and not seen maybe is the right way to say it, or understood. I find it a lot when it comes to school functions that aren't on the calendar.
Yeah.
A lot, to the extent that I like don't know. I feel bad. I'm put in a very awkward, uncomfortable position.
Yeah.
I don't like feeling like I'm the mom that is always commenting, or it maybe insinuates I don't want to be there. But really, it's like to have within a week's notice of a function that everyone's going to go, to get an answer like, oh, it's okay if you don't come. No, it's not okay that my two children don't have a mom there. So I find those types of things like, I guess you can say that's a lonely feeling too, is to feel like you're the only one saying that. And that's one thing. But I can say I developed such great relationships. Like I said, my assistant Sarah is like one of my closest. I mean, she's honestly like a little sister, because I'm feeling very old these days. But she even still helps me. I started women's wellness retreats as a kind of a passion project. I started last year at the Altair. I'm running another women's wellness retreat in November this year. Wow. And she still comes on them to come assist me. So I really have such great connections. Like I said, the two interns that then became employees and now are doing amazing things with their career and their family lives. I just met them both separately for coffee this summer. And to know that, I have a lot of nice connections. So I don't want to only focus on the things that you missed out. You actually built a lot of really nice connections. So I can't say I'm alone, but I would say it's a little bit of a lonely feeling.
Yeah. No, I think a lot of people feel that, but we're working on that, trying to network and bring and find all these women in all parts of, the world and kind of bringing them together.
It's really nice.
Okay, final question is really just asking if you would, what would be your message that you would want to leave to our listeners today?
It's always possible. Anything is possible. It really is. You never should feel like you have to limit yourself. You should approach life just very open and curious. It's like my new thing to acknowledge those two words, like being open and curious, because then Hashem shows you and you just go with it. You're like, okay, we're going here now. And you really have so much trust in Hashem. I see so much of Hashem, thank God now in all my life. But when I was in business, I would see Hashem everywhere. I was like, oh, why me and not her? Why was I chosen to do it? It's only Hashem. Like, you have to just really rely and trust in Hashem to open things up for you and just go with it and follow that and always realign with yourself and trust in yourself, trust in Hashem, and just keep moving.
Love that. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing such amazing advice. You're really an inspiration. And it's just, I love the story. I love the way that you were able to take your talent and turn it into a business and then really continue to grow the business and change the business and find new paths. And your confidence is really, really amazing. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, really.
This episode was made possible by our friends at Roth & Co. We're grateful for their continued partnership. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and that you'll join us for the next one. If you haven't already, be sure to follow the show and leave a rating. It really helps us grow and reach more listeners like you. Don't forget, you can listen on your favorite podcast platform or watch the full conversation on YouTube. Until we meet again, stay inspired.